felt overwhelmed and undervalued and too thinly spread? Do you ever get that sense of dread when you see a client's name flash up on your phone, urgently trying to get hold of you, even though you've been trying to get hold of them for the last couple of weeks? And have you ever noticed yourself feeling that creeping resentment as you're putting your time and energy and attention into something that you don't really value? The truth is, we've all probably been in that similar situation, but we grin and bear it, we suck it up, and we just go along without questioning whether this has to be the case, let alone imagine if it could be different. Because we're in a culture that drives and that's fueled by bigger, better, faster, more. And with that, we're losing our capacity to stop, to reflect, and think whether these trophies of success, these hallmarks of the velvet gutter, are actually what we want. And this is what I want to shine a light on today. So we're going to be looking at, I want to argue really why less is better. And with that, I want to help you to identify who are the people that you most want to help, who are the people that you feel you can make your highest contribution for. And then once that's happened, then it's really about how do we set up systems and processes to make sure that your efforts and your energy is fueled towards the people that are really going to benefit. So the key idea really here is that the pursuit of less delivers more fulfillment and higher quality work. And I thought I'd just share a little bit about why I am really passionate about this subject. So as Andy said, I specialize in helping those in the finance sector to communicate more effectively. And I've spent lots of time prior to lockdown running around the country, coaching people, training people, delivering workshops. And then when lockdown hit, I decided that I was going to pour all my energy into creating some online programs. I thought I'd scale what I did without exhausting myself, because I could see, as Helena said, there is a big need for helping people to communicate. So this was all well and good, and then lockdown lifted, and lots of lovely invitations came through. Could I speak at this conference? Could I do these leadership programs? Could I coach these people? And I just merrily said yes to it all because I was just delighted to be out on the road again. But I said yes for a number of other reasons. The first is that I'm a recovering people pleaser. And I noticed that quite a lot of financial advisors are this too. We like to help people. This is a noble profession. But this means saying no actually can be really hard. The second reason is I like doing lots of things. I like variety. I like figuring things out if I don't know the answer to them. And that's fine up to a point. But actually, it's tiring learning all the time. And that means that your, the time left to do the stuff that you're actually good at falls. And as a people pleaser, disappointing people is a big deal. Linked with that, everything takes longer. So evenings and weekends gets consumed, and you wind up ending up being really tired all the time. And interestingly, the British Medical Journal has just published some research to say that sleep deprivation has a similar impact on our brain as alcohol, although arguably a lot less fun. It makes us much less sharp. Thirdly, chuck into the mix COVID, when we're all living at the office, the work doesn't stop, this can-do attitude that we all prize so highly on Teams comes at a cost. And you can probably imagine that this is all conspiring to a perfect storm where earlier in the year I got completely burnt out. My foot was on the pedal and literally nothing was coming back. I'd lost my mojo, I'd lost any joy in my work at all. And it was at this time that I listened to a podcast. It was Tim Ferriss interviewing Greg McKeown. And the subject was Essentialism. And the Essentialism concept really is about making the wisest possible contribution, like the wisest investment of your time so that you can make the highest contribution. And I want to share some of the thought processes that I went through and the tough questions that I asked myself so that you could potentially benefit too. Because what I notice in a lot of advice firms is that they too are suffering with what Morgan Randstrom, he's a brilliant writer on the subject, calls the triple whammy. And he writes, the triple whammy will sink you, it will strain your marriage, it will leave you exhausted, it might even make you sell your business to untangle yourself from the mess. The triple whammy is too much work for too many clients for too little money. So, this leads to overstaffing, low margins, frustrated clients, and so on, and so on, and so on. Some of you might recognize this in your firms. So how do we get here? Well, I think this rests on three mindsets, three beliefs. And the first is the undisciplined pursuit of more. More acclaim, more status, more growth, more scale. And this is a concept that Jim Collins writes about in his book, How the Mighty Fail. And in it, he basically talks about the fact that great companies began and became great because they were very, very focused on what they were brilliant at. And then they start growing quickly, and they get the wrong people in the wrong seats, and coupled with that, some complacency creeps in, and they start to overreach and overextend, and that's a precursor to their decline. The second is that this idea that we can have it all, that somehow we can fit it all in. And it's quite interesting to note, the term priority was actually singular in the 1400s in our language. And then by the 1900s, we'd pluralized it. So it used to be the prior thing, and now we talk about priorities. And I don't know if you've noticed, but busy has been a little bit of a status symbol. How are you? I'm busy. Subtext, I'm really important and much in demand. But what we have to be careful of was what Socrates says was, beware of the barrenness of a busy life. And so what we're really doing here is we are denying the reality of trade-offs. So a trade-off is where we want two things simultaneously. So do we want more pay or do we want more holiday? Do we want to finish the email or do we want to get to the next meeting on time? And what we have to realize is that we can't have both. We have to choose one and then go big on the thing that we want. And when we're in this really overcommitted, overextended space, it then all becomes about the quick win. The person that gets our attention is the one that's shouting loudest. And I certainly had this experience in my life. And what that means is then we end up getting tricked by the trivial. We're just all about the quick wins, the ticking off the to-do list. But actually, if you extrapolate that over our lives, then that might mean that we look back and regret some of the choices that we made because we didn't focus on what was important. So, doesn't have to be this way, because actually, if you're willing to make some tough decisions, here's what's waiting for you on the other side. So, how do we get there? Well, the first step really is about creating this space, taking your time away to really rigorously think and reflect about what is important in your life, much like what you were saying, Nick. And I think it can be helpful to have someone ask you these questions so that you can focus on that blue sky, like what is actually important. Take yourself off-site, turn your phones off, and really carve out that time to think. And once you've got that clarity, you see, it becomes much, much easier then to say no. Once you've stopped deciding that you're going to try and please everybody, then you're at liberty to really focus on the people that you want to help. That's where you'll make the highest contribution. So rather than assume that you can have it all, the better question to ask really is, what is the trade-off I'm willing to make? Which problem do I want? And what can I go big on? So a non-essentialist, of which I previously was a poster girl, is all about how can I do both? How can I just cram this in? How can I, you're going at 100 miles an hour. But an essentialist asks, what's the trade-off? And so in my life, what I decided to trade off was I initially decided that I was going to earn less money, but I was going to free up more time and more control over how I spent my time and how I spent my attention. The next problem that I was willing to face was some insecurity, as opposed to feeling really overstretched, really on the back foot, and not having much fun. And in terms of what I'm going big on, it's still a little bit of a work in progress, but I've carved out some space that I can really think and reflect and write and teach on the subjects that I'm fascinated by. So what can you go big on? What are some of the things that you would really like to focus your energy and attention on, and where you can make the highest contribution? And this really is thinking carefully about who are your ideal target clients. You know, we saw earlier this morning that there's loads of you looking for clients out there, and there's a huge demand, which is such a great position to be in, because then you can really, as long as you're focused, have much success in this area. So some of the work that I've been doing with firms have been helping them to articulate this. And here are some considerations that you might want to think about. What's the type of work that you'd like to be doing? Do you want to be doing that really complex stuff that really stretches those big brains, that gives you a real kick when you find an answer? Or actually, like some of my clients, they say that they're in the Indian summer of their career and they don't want to do anything too complex. They just quite like to keep things simple. So what is it that you want to be doing? Secondly, of course, how much money have they got? That's definitely going to be a consideration. But I think more interestingly is, like, what are the characteristics of those clients? So if someone hasn't got quite the wealth that you're hoping to work with, but they've got a really good, solid business plan, and they've got a lot of drive, and with your help, they'll definitely get there, would you take them on? Or conversely, if they've got loads of liquid assets, like 600K liquid assets, but they seem overbearing, have got loads of time on their hands, and they're probably going to be telling you how to do your job, is that something that you want to put up with? You know, if you've got a waiting list, maybe not. If you haven't, then you need to really carefully outline the terms of your relationship, and how you manage their expectations will be key to make sure that that works. What about their background? Some clients like specifically working with business owners because they're a business owner, they've got some of the same problems and so on. Being niche is really important, and I'll come on to that in a second. What's their motivation for working with you? Do they feel squeamish about money because they've just inherited loads and actually they don't want anything to do with it? Do they feel a lot of shame around money because their financial affairs aren't in order? You know, what's their emotional relationship with money like? Or why wouldn't they do it themselves? You know, where's the value that you're going to bring? What kind of relationship do they want with you? Do they want loads of contact time? Do they not want lots of contact time? What's important to you? And what's their temperament like? Do they seem pleasant? Do you think they're going to be able to hold their nerve? So what are you going to prioritize? Because it's quite unlikely that someone will walk through the door with all of those characteristics initially. And I think when I'm working with firms, it's sometimes quite useful to have these discussions within your team, so you get these stories, really, like, who have you taken a punt on and did it work out? Who didn't quite fit, and was it a good move? What are your exceptions? Would you take on children of maybe very wealthy clients because that's the relationship? But always be mindful of your intuition. Your instinct is rarely wrong, and certainly in my experience, if I've ignored it, then it will usually come back to bite me. So at this point, I'd quite like to talk a little bit about the power of niching. I'm a big fan of niching, partly because this is where we're really able to go deep into a problem. We're really able to hold someone's hand and demonstrate the value that we bring. It's very difficult to offer really well thought out advice if you're trying to be everything to everybody. I think it's much better to niche, to be, as Andy said, you know, to have that inch wide, mile deep market. It's much better, I think, to go for 50 perfect fits rather than, you know, spread your net very widely. And of course, then it means you're much easier to refer. People will come and find you more easily, but equally, you'll probably get more of the clients that you want. So if you niche already, is there a way that you could niche even more? Is there a way you could think about going even further into that niche? You know, with the digital landscape that we're in, now's really never been a better time to be able to really go deeply into a niche, because people will be able to find you easily. And if you haven't had a niche, then think about which of your client segments do you think you could really add some value, could really add some extra help that perhaps isn't so populated with advisors. So Morgan Randstrom again, he says his is a lifestyle practice. Sorry, it's not a lifestyle practice, it's a lifetime practice. And because he's so involved with those families that he works with, he calls himself a deep planning boutique. And I love that. I love that notion. So why fight this tendency in a race to scale to 200? So you might be wondering, is there a specific ideal number of clients? And of course, this will vary depending on your firm size and maturity. But it might be helpful for you to know about Dunbar's number. So Robin Dunbar was an evolutionary psychologist, and he studied tribal groups, and he recognized that when groups go above 150, the social system starts to struggle because it's too complex. So if you think about all the relationships in your life, your family, your friends, what you want to be doing is subtracting that from the number of clients that you want so that you can serve them adequately and brilliantly. So in a nutshell, the depth of the relationship starts slipping once you go over a certain number. I think Nick Murray writes about this. He says if he was starting from scratch, he would aim for 100 clients, charge them 1%, but look at a portfolio size of 2 million. And Bill Bacharach he thinks that 30 clients, charging them $36,000 a year is what you want to aim for. He thinks that you can't really offer much coordination in terms of advice for more than 30 families. So a few different opinions there. So we've looked at your idea of success, hopefully. We've looked at then who are the kind of people that you want to serve. Now really it's about looking at how do we set up systems and processes to make that effortless, to execute on that. And one of the things that I noticed with working with a number of clients was that they were spending quite a lot of time on a discovery meeting that, 2 hours or so, it didn't go very far, it didn't go very far, or that they were ending up working with clients that were really difficult to work with. They found their approach to life rather challenging. And it seemed to me that they weren't really screening clients. They didn't really have a kind of filtering process in order to make sure that the exchange of time and value was paying off. But not only that, what I know for myself is that actually going to see a financial advisor is quite scary, as we saw the advice earlier. There's a lot of expertise. You're not really quite sure what questions you ask. Maybe your financial affairs should be in order. And if then they come along and ask you, what do you want to do with the rest of your life, and they're a perfect stranger, quite a lot has to happen for that trust to be in place. Quite a lot of conditions have to be in place for them to feel able to answer that question. And so I started helping clients put in a bit more of a process around how to screen clients to begin with, so that if they do want to progress and if there is a good fit, then they can make the most of the discovery meeting and looking at how they can meet their then emotional needs to have more fruitful conversations at those early stages. So that's when we looked at starting to screen clients. But if you're looking at your existing client base as well, it's important to think about, if you are going to work with those clients for the next 20 years, are you going to feel properly recompensed? Are you going to be pleased to hear from them all the time? And if not, maybe it's an opportunity to disengage. And this is another area of work that we've been doing, is looking at, okay, you've got a client base, but actually not everybody is a great fit. So what are some of the things that we could do to graduate, to signpost them on? And at this point, people will sometimes say to me, well, if we're approaching max capacity, how do we reassure the directors that we're not going to lose some of the recurrent income? And what I would say to this is really, well, how are you going to use that newfound capacity to add more value to your existing clients? And is that the value that they're going to be willing to pay for? Are they going to recognize that? And as Grant Cardone says, when value exceeds price, people part with money. So you don't need to worry too much about putting your fees up if you're going to be working with less, as long as you're offering great value. And some of you will have seen Holly Mackay's great presentation last year, where she looked at what makes clients grumpy. And if we see here, like passive relationship with sporadic contact was one of the things that makes clients grumpy. So if you're working with less, you can be in contact with them more and you can give them much more tailored advice. So that's what I would think about offering, is working with less people, but giving them more attention, more tailored advice, and better outcomes. So hopefully, you're now in a position that you've had a bit of chance to think about what success looks like to you. You've got a clearer idea about what your ideal client looks like. So just to say, you don't have to say yes to every prospect. Once you've got that clarity in your mind, it becomes much easier to make that trade-off. Because if you say yes to this person that's not quite a right fit, then you're saying no to somebody else who probably is a much better fit. So ultimately, you really don't have to be a martyr to your business or to your clients. Quite the opposite. Once you've got that clarity, you're in the driving seat. And this is so important because ultimately, as Greg McKeown says, if you don't prioritize your life, somebody else will. So thank you very much.